Tired of bloating, fatigue and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delay release capsules, real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday's episode of Trending, brought to you in association with NutriHealth 365. I hope you're well. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far, wherever you are in the world. Today's show, we're going to focus very much on the UK and UK-centric stories, although, as we speak about most of the time, all this agenda is an international agenda. So if it's happening in this country, it's almost certainly happening in yours as well, or it's certainly coming further down the line. Different countries are further ahead in different aspects of the agenda. You know, you go to the east in places like Japan, the technological agenda seems to be further along. You come into the west and other agendas seem to be further along. But ultimately, it's an international agenda. So whatever I'm talking about, in whatever country I'm talking about, it's coming to yours very soon. So we're going to focus the first part of this show on the grooming gangs here in the UK, which we spoke about extensively when we first launched the show because it was in the news. It was very topical. So for people that don't have a history of this, essentially there was grooming gangs of Pakistani men in a number of towns across the country, Telford, Rotherham and so on, that were systematically able to groom, abuse young girls for decades with no interference and no investigation from local authorities, whether that be the councils, whether that be the police. And it's even come out since that local council and local police were complicit in it, and many not only knew what was going on, but some even perhaps were involved in what was going on. Now, there was obviously a major cover-up to try and stop as many heads rolling as possible. And since then, it's been very, very similar to Operation U-Tree, if you guys remember that one, the investigation into political child abuse through various different regimes of British government involving Ted Heath, Leon Britton, and so on, that came out after the Jimmy Savile expose was common knowledge. It's just the same kind of system that's being used with this grooming gangs inquiry, which is delay, and obstruct. So to the point, you never really see any heads roll. Operation U-Tree went through head police officer after head police officer after head of the inquiry after head of the inquiry. They weren't there very long and nothing actually ever really came out. There was a few rumblings in the media, but no one's head has ever rolled. No one's ever stood in a docket and faced the repercussions for their actions. And so far, this national inquiry into the grooming gangs, which firstly was only brought about because of public backlash, they weren't going to do a national inquiry initially. And this is another thing that's very important to mention. This shows the power of the people because they tried to sweep this under the carpet even more than they already did. And the people said no. The people did simply not allow that to happen. And as a result, they did have to announce a national inquiry. But since then, as I said, it's been just obstruction and delay. This week, this is making the press again because a number of the victims in this grooming gang scandal that were part of this inquiry have chosen to walk away from it because they say it's not going to achieve what it should, which is holding those who were involved, complicit, turned a blind eye, or those people in those gangs accountable, which is exactly what an inquiry should be doing. It should also be preventing this from ever being able to happen again. But that's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to contain the problem. Just like Operation U-Tree did all those years ago, it's just like the 9/11 Commission did, just like the COVID Commission are doing right now. They're there to contain what really comes out so that people have a feeling that they are chucked some breadcrumbs, that there is some acceptance that this went on. But the real scale of it and the real way it was allowed to go on and by who doesn't ever come out. Because a number of those cities that I mentioned there, you know, your Telfords, your Rotherhams, Rochdales and others, were run by Labour councils. We now have a Labour government. The last thing they want is people associating Labour members or Labour officials, I should say, being complicit, turning a blind eye or not being able to stand up for the people they are meant to represent with the current government. Also, it's very clear that the police would have had to have been complicit and possibly involved in various different capacities because things were reported to them over the years and nothing was done, nothing was followed up. So let's dive into why these girls seem to think that this inquiry is not going to be fruitful and why they are walking away from it. Elizabeth, which is a cover name for one of the survivors, said that the process feels like a cover-up and it had created a toxic environment for survivors. These 3 abusers who have left have accused officials of trying to water down the inquiry by broadening its scope to wider issues of sexual abuse and exploitation, which that absolutely needs to be looked into as well, 100%, because as we have discussed many a time, as David has written about, the depths of abuse that goes on in the establishment, the depths of abuse that goes on internationally, if people knew the scale of that, they would be utterly shocked. You know, we've heard and read about some very high-profile cases. You know, Jeffrey Epstein seems to be in the papers still every day, Jimmy Savile and others. But the scale of it goes well beyond the names that you've heard of. So I understand that needs to be looked into. But what they're saying is that by doing that, you're widening the scope and therefore you're not focusing on what this inquiry is meant to do, which is these specific towns, these specific problems, and these specific police forces, council members, and so on. So I agree that this should be very, very tight in its scope to try and expose exactly what's gone on there so that the people who are responsible for that particular incident are held to account. There's also frustration around the length of time it's taken to appoint a chairperson, with some seeing this as a delay tactic. Now, again, this is one of the roots of one of the issues that these people are having. So another survivor, Ellie Reynolds, has suggested having establishment insiders representing the very systems that failed us. And she's referring to the concept that this government are going to appoint the chairperson. Now, that in itself is utterly ridiculous. That's like me being accused of fraud, but me getting to choose who investigates me. Well, you choose somebody that was going to find you innocent, wouldn't you? You choose somebody that was going to be sympathetic to your cause. And that's exactly what this Labour government are going to do. They are going to appoint somebody with a mandate not to get to the bottom of it, not to get to the bottom of the truth, not to get justice for these girls, but somebody there to control this cover-up, control this narrative. That's exactly what they're going to do. So what she says there is absolutely right. You've got the establishment in all its various forms, local authorities, councils, police, etc., that have not only failed these girls, have been complicit in their abuse and probably involved in certain cases. You've then got a national government who have done everything they can so far to stop even anyone looking into this. You're labelled a racist, or you were labelled a racist if you even talked about it. And they've done everything they can to not have a national inquiry, but the backlash was so large they were forced to cave in the end, which just again, as I mentioned, shows where the power dynamic really is. And what now needs to happen is not only do people need to go, great, we've got a national inquiry, they need to hold this national inquiry to account and demand that it actually does its job. And if you're appointing an official who is from that same establishment that was complicit and involved in this systematic abuse, what do you really think that chairperson, what do you really think that establishment figure is going to allow to be exposed? They're not going to allow the truth. They're not. Now, I have massive reservations about the judicial system in general. However, the concept of appointing a judge to oversee this inquiry would at least alleviate that argument of this not being biased, of this being impartial. Because in theory, a judge is impartial. A judge doesn't have a political persuasion. In the UK, unlike in America, where you have the court system and you have the Supreme Court, and you are a Republican or you're a Democrat when you are elected or appointed to the Supreme Court. So politics is fundamentally involved in the judicial system. In this country, officially anyway, it's not. So therefore, a judge is there to be impartial. They're not there to let a political affiliation impact their decision or their rulings or their investigations. Whether you believe that is actually what happens is another thing. But on the surface, they would at least have to pay lip service to that. Whereas whoever is appointed chairperson, we know will be appointed by the Labour government. So as a result, their affiliation is not going to be to these girls. It's going to be to that government. So this is just, to me, gaslighting of the highest order. It's looking at victims and trying everything they possibly can to not give them justice. And also to not put measures in place or look at the failings that happened that then prevent this from happening to the next generation of British girls across the country. Really, this is the job now of a statesman to come out and go, you know what, we should be embarrassed, disgusted, and ashamed that this happened on our shores. This happened to our citizens. This happened to young children and teenage girls who should be in the prime of their lives, having a great time, looking at the world as an opportunity to go out and explore. Instead, they had those years destroyed by these gangs, and lots of them, understandably so, if not all of them, will suffer with psychological issues for the rest of their lives as a result of the trauma that they went through. If you represent a country where that's gone on, whether you were in government, you were in office or whatever or not when it happened, but you know it happened in your country, you should be doing everything to hold the people to account that were either complicit, that turned a blind eye, or that were involved. And you should be putting them out there on public display for people to know who they are. So much goes under the carpet, so much goes unquestioned, and so many people that have committed the most abhorrent acts live the rest of their lives with no one knowing who they are, live the rest of their lives with the freedom of getting away with whatever they've done, while these girls are going to suffer for the rest of their lives. How are they going to trust people again, for example? How are they going to trust the establishment again? They're not. Because not only has it failed them by being inadequate, it's actually been complicit. For me, this is, there's lots of issues in this country, but this is one of the biggest ones, because unless you accept and understand what's happened in the past, then the present and the future is destined to repeat it in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that they are trying to cover this up just shows they're trying to cover it up because they don't want you to know just how deep and sinister these kind of things go. These towns I mentioned, your Rotherhams, your Telfords, your Rochdales and others, they are the tip of the iceberg. Just like your Jeffrey Epsteins and Jimmy Saviles were the tip of the iceberg. What really goes on underneath the surface absolutely infests the establishment. And I know this is a dark topic. I know this is a topic that is very uncomfortable to discuss and uncomfortable for people to hear. But the truth doesn't change because you don't want to hear it. Internationally, not just in Britain, across the world, these rings of abuse and satanic ritual abuse infest the establishment. Kind of makes you feel differently, doesn't it? When they come out and tell you you should be doing something, or you're the problem, or you're a racist, or you're a bigot, while these people are up to these kind of things. And then covering it up for the people who were there before them doing the same thing. I understand why there is so much anger in this country on this issue. I do. I feel it myself. I can't imagine what these girls and the parents of them must have gone through and are still being put through by the lack of any desire for there to be genuine justice for them and to prevent this happening to the next generation. So, what happens from here? Who knows? The Home Secretary has come out and said that this does not change anything, basically. Well, it should, Because if the victims are the ones coming out going, this isn't fit for purpose, then maybe you should listen to them. You didn't listen to them years ago. Maybe you should listen to them now. Rather than trying to cover up for your mates, you despicable human being. Right, I feel like I've peaked. I know where we go from here. But if you're watching with us on YouTube, you're watching with us on Twitter, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to carry on now on Iconic. We're going to talk about British troops on the ground in Israel. We're going to talk about the UK Storm missiles being used to strike Russian territory. And we're going to talk about even more from Rachel Reeves ahead of the next budget. If you haven't checked out iconic.com yet, go ahead and check that out now. The link's in the description below for the rest of this episode. You'll find tons more content on there every single day across the political spectrum, across the spirituality, consciousness, health, so much more. So check us out, and if you like what you see, take out your first month for $1.99 and see where you get. I'll see you over on Iconic. Bye for now.